Thank you. Well, tonight I believe I have a word I want to share. I've been really trying to reflect on this here, and I said, Lord, what do you want to do here in World Revival Church? And so many things we could talk about, and so many things I think God wants to birth in our hearts. But I think the thing I kept hearing was that I just want my people to encounter me. And sometimes we can make church about learning things. It's good to learn things. We can make church about a lot of things, but sometimes we come to encounter God, to know Him. Over the years in a revival at Smithton and all that, what changed my life was when I encountered God. It's in those moments of glory and encounter that change everything. Tonight, my message is certainly not the highlight of the night, but I want to hopefully in this message invite you to press in. My goal tonight is for you to encounter God afresh. You say, well, I've encountered God a lot. Good. I hope you do it again tonight. I hope that you press in tonight. I hope we need God. We need His presence. This is an outpouring night. It's time not only for Him to pour out, but us pour out, to receive, to encounter, to enjoy, to know. There's a story that really struck me, and I've spent a lot of time on it the last few days. It's a familiar story, but I hopefully want to invite you to look at it a little differently. We're going to go down a familiar path, but sometimes the problem with the Bible is that we think we already recognize everything, right? The stories. I was reading to my son the other night. He says, I already know that story. That's the problem. We think we already know. But sometimes we actually might find ourselves struck by the fact that the Lord is in the place and we weren't even aware of it. Sometimes God has a way of disrupting and speaking and repositioning and inviting us to look in a fresh way. If you have your Bible, you could turn with me to Genesis 27. I'm going to read one verse from Genesis 27, then we're going to go into Genesis 28. But we're going to pick up a story right in the middle of the story. How many of you like that? You're watching a movie and bam, the action starts. That's what we're going to do here tonight. Genesis 27, verse 43. Rebekah says to her son Jacob, listen carefully, my son. Get ready and flee. What's going on here? This is mama telling her son, her precious son, get ready. It's time to hit the bricks. You're going to have to leave. You're going to have to run off here. And what we're doing is we're finding ourselves in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a challenge, in the middle of a family squabble. Anybody here been around family squabbles ever? You and your wife get along all the time, right? You and your kids never see anything any differently, right? There's never any squabbles in churches or families. We're all really happy with how everything's always laid out, right? So much of life is filled with challenges and issues, and sometimes we actually find ourselves disappointed and frustrated and challenged because sometimes we don't see ourselves moving into places that we'd hope to go. Sometimes we find ourselves hitting snags, hitting things that we didn't expect. And that's kind of what's happening in this story here. Because you got Jacob the mama's boy. He was a mama's boy. His brother Esau, he was the man's man, a hunter. Imagine like Aaron Lage with long flowing hair, This red-haired man, he's out. And his dad liked Esau better than Jacob. Even though God spoke to him about Jacob, he liked Esau a little better, And guess what? Sometimes we find ourselves actually being motivated or distracted by some of our own personal preferences and thoughts, and can kind of miss what God's up to. But you see, Esau was good at hunting, and he was good at bringing Daddy home good deer that tasted really good. And also, as most of you know, Jacob and Esau, they were twins. And they were fighting in the womb. And Esau came out first, and Jacob had him by the heel. They were fighting to be the first one out, the first one to get the birthright, the first one to get that place of honor, the first one to get the power of attorney, the first one to have the stature and power and significance. But Jacob, he missed out on it. Esau came out first. Esau was Daddy's favorite. Esau was strong. He was a man's man. But Jacob stayed in the house with his mama. Read it for yourself. Sometimes there's challenges, there's questions, there's issues. All of us on some level feel a calling, I think. I mean, unless there's really something wrong with you, all of us feel a calling to greatness. But sometimes we feel like everything's standing in the way of that. Circumstances and problems and issues. And as you were to read this story, going back a chapter or so, here's old man Isaac. The years have passed on. Time has not treated him well, and now he's blind. And he's envisioning the fact that he's at the end of life. And it's time now to give the blessing. It's time now to pass on this rite of passage. It's time now to give the power of attorney to one of his sons. And he's already decided he's going to give it to the champion Esau, the mighty man, the man with strength. So Isaac begins to speak to Esau, says, go and kill me one of those deer I like, and cook it just the way I like. And I want you to bring it into me. We're going to have a covenant meal. I'm going to lay my hands on you, and I'm going to speak and decree the blessing. And I'm going to pass down upon you the promises, the purposes, the heritage, the realms of glory that I've known and felt. And after Esau left the room, Rebekah heard everything he said. And she spoke to Jacob and said, I want you to go and get a goat. And we're going to go and kill that goat, and we're going to dress you up like Esau. Esau, he's all smooth skin. He's all girly. I'm sorry, I'm backwards. Jacob's the one who's all girly. Esau's manly and just hairy and just... So they kill this goat, and they actually take the fur of the goat and they put it on his arms. And they put it on his back of his neck. He's all smooth. And they go into old man Isaac there, and he's sitting there. And he says, Dad, I brought you the meal you wanted. And old man Isaac says, well, you kind of smell like Esau, but you sound like Jacob. Are you sure? And Jacob begins to say, no, I'm Esau. The name Jacob means the deceiver, the trickster, the striver, the contender. Jacob, in the depths of his soul, wanted to be great. He wanted to be powerful. And in fact, God put that in him. God put that in him to want to be great. But something in him wanted to push the issue maybe a little further. Something in him began to make him press the issue. It caused him to begin to deceive his own father, to lay claim to something that wasn't his. See, it's easy. I think when we read the Bible, we want to make people good guys or bad guys. And I was a kid, that's the thing I used to ask my mom, are they a good guy or a bad guy? My son wants to ask me those questions sometimes. I get it. We like it when the good guys wear the white hats and the bad guys wear the black hats. But that's rarely how life really works. You say, is Jacob a good guy or a bad guy? Well, he's a little bit of both. He's a conflicted man. A man who wants to be amazing, who wants to be strong, who wants to be powerful. A man who wants to have strength, who wants to carry on his father's line. But a man who's not afraid to cut a few corners when needed. Jacob stays true to his name. He becomes the supplanter. He becomes a deceiver. He becomes the cunning one. You say, well, is Jacob a bad man? I don't know. It's kind of hard to live in Esau's shadow. It's kind of hard when your daddy likes somebody better than you. It's kind of hard when your brother's willing to give away the blessing for a pot of stew, but you know in the depths of your soul that there's something more. It's not easy being a mama's boy in a world that doesn't understand that. So here we go. We come back into this story, come back into this moment in verse 43. He's come and he's stolen the birthright. He's stolen the promise. He's taken the elder son's portion. And Esau has showed up now and he's angry. He showed up now and said, I can't believe my brother did this to me. Esau has showed up and said, you know what? As soon as old man Isaac dies, you can be assured that we're going to have a second funeral. Esau can't imagine his own brother would do this to him. Somebody'd say, well, is Jacob a bad man? No, he's a conflicted man. He's a man with mixed motivations. He's a man who has something of God stirring in him, but he doesn't know how to work it out, doesn't know how to move forward. He desires recognition and status. He's called to do great things. But the problem is he's the deceiver. You know what the problem with this story is? He's us. He's us. That's who we are. That's who I am. We're people that feel things and desire things. And we should come to church and want to just have an experience with God. But it's easy to come to church and it becomes about status. Well, he's on the prayer team and I'm not, or this or that. We start longing for this. We start longing for that. And we do that. I do that. We do that. We find ourselves with mixed motivations. We find ourselves wanting to be recognized, to be appreciated, to be noticed. I spent so many years of my life so driven by that stupid deception. You know, Bill's moving in down at the network office there, and I got a bunch of my old books down there, and he looks at me and says, well, you know, you could have probably bought a car with all these. It's like, yeah. Buying books, you know, I do like buying books, but there's something in me trying to, you know, I remember thinking, you know, if I could just know something else, maybe Pastor Steve would want to let me speak, or maybe if I just had a little more Bible knowledge, you know, I might be recognized. People might stop making fun of me being from Arkansas or something, you know. You know, and we start having that. We want to be recognized. We want to be celebrated. And that's not all wrong. That's the point. That's not all wrong. Do you hear me tonight? It's not wrong to want to be great. It's not wrong to want to be an influencer. It's not wrong to want to be the one that leads your family into greatness. That's not wrong. It's not wrong to want to do amazing things. It's not wrong to want your voice to thunder and shake. But the problem is so often, even though there's something right in us that wants to move toward greatness, there's the fear in us, the anxiousness in us, the desire to take the shortcut, the desire to push forward what we'd like to see. And we find ourselves being mixed, in mixed motivations, mixed moments. Like I said, there's all these people, there's people that start asking me about great moves of God and revival, and they tell me, well, were they a great man? I don't know. What do you want me to tell you? They were a man. You say, oh, what about Smith Wigglesworth? Yeah, the man who got kicked out of the Elam churches because he was so rough and cantankerous and unwilling to work with the pastors. Who do you want me to tell you about? I mean, men are men, women are women. We're people mixed, broken, foolish, distracted, hopefully motivated for right things, but it's hard. It's hard to find anybody that's as pure as the history books want to tell you they are. I'm not here tonight to talk about historians or people or past. I'm here tonight to talk about you. Because you know what? We're like Jacob. And here's the question I have here. Can anything happen to people whose motives are mixed? Can anything happen to those who are fighting to be recognized, maybe in ways that are not so good? Can anything happen to people who think they know about God, but they're really living off of someone else's glory, someone else's revelation? Did you know that Jacob, is as wise and as insightful and as fiery and as resourceful as he was, Jacob had never had an encounter with God. There's people in this room here tonight that you're living off someone else's revelation. You're living off of Abraham. You're living off of Isaac. Thank God for the experiences of Abraham and Isaac, but you've never had an experience yourself. I don't know if you know this or not, but God doesn't have any grandkids. You can't get into heaven off of daddy's coattails. Steve and Kathy are some of the most anointed and powerful people I've ever known. But you're not going to be able to ride their coattails into glory. And their revelation and their insight and their scriptural declarations are in of themselves not enough if you yourself have not been overcome, if you yourself have not had the glory come and strike you, stir you, awaken you, and cause you to become the person you're called to be. Because you see, in this house, sometimes we have a desire for greatness. In this house, we've heard the stories of old. In this house, we've sometimes even been encouraged and awakened from the truths of the Scripture. But God is saying, I want to take you somewhere else. And then if you're really honest, you wake up and your mama is saying, it's time to hit the bricks. It's time to leave town. You're like, what am I going to do? I've been hanging out with my mama all my life. I've never hardly left town. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And suddenly you're going to find yourself having to go into the wilderness. Go into a place you've never been. Go into a place of loneliness. Is there any hope for you? You see, it's hard to go into the wilderness. It's hard to go into that place. It's hard when you start having to go somewhere you've never been. It's hard when you wake up and you know what? You say, I'm not sure I've ever really had the revelation that I think I have had. I'm not sure that I've really gone to the place that I need to go. Tonight I want to talk to you about that. What happens when we who are like Jacob find ourselves in the wilderness? What do we do when we find ourselves out of everything we've ever known and we're going to have to make decisions? Some of us tonight would say, you know what, there's no hope for us because we have this idea that we're never going to have God until we're clean enough. You know the revival message, you know this thing that people say if we could ever get cleaned up, we'd have revival. But since we're not cleaned up, we'll never have revival. I hear that all the time. You know, what we need is some repentance here. And get some people weeping and mourning and travailing and feeling bad about how awful they are. To feel bad about the fact that they're the supplanters. That they deceive and they're striving. And if you weren't so rotten, you might get God. Guess what? You're pretty rotten and so am I. And here we are in the wilderness, and what's the hope for us? We wake up and we realize maybe it's not everything I thought it was. I mean, I can remember a few times Pastor Steve's talked to me, and one time he told me, you know, I don't know who you think you are. I mean, you think you're a prophet or something? Rubbing your beard, you know, and like you know something, you know. I mean, you know, you need to get on your face and find this, you know, walk this out. I mean, you know, you read about all these revival people, but, you know, just because you know their stories doesn't mean you have one. Just because you've heard the story of Smithton and you've heard how revival came doesn't mean you've ever actually been a person that's actually carried this. You've ever seen this. See, you wake up one day and your mama's telling you it's time to go because if you don't leave, there's trouble going to be had. Esau's going to come and hunt you down. And you realize what you did and how you messed everything up and how things are mixed. You saying I'm a bad person? No, I'm saying it's a mixed motivation. I'm saying there's some good mixed in with some other things. And here you are, you're in the wilderness, you're in a place you've never been. Jacob is traveling out far from his family, far from the world he's ever known, far from the land he's comprehended, heading out into a land, and then he finds himself in a real problem because now the sun has gone down and darkness has come. You say, what's the problem? This isn't like Kansas City in, the 21st century. There are no street lights. There are no policemen. When darkness comes, the thieves and the robbers come out. As darkness comes, the tribal leaders begin to wonder who it is traveling across their ancestral land and whose throat they need to slit. And here is Jacob alone in the wilderness, alone with his own deception. He somehow got the blessing, but what good is it to have the blessing and now have to leave town? Is there any hope for us that have been kicked out? Is there any hope for us that are in the wilderness? Is there any hope for us that thought we had it figured out, but we don't quite do? Like I said, sometimes it's easy to say no. I hear the people on TV, America's going to hell in a handbasket. The only thing we could expect is just the judgment of God. We wonder why nobody under 30 wants to go to church. Well, let's blame it all on the millennials. It's all their fault for everything. I'm saying that sarcastically, of course. What we are is we're Jacob with our mixed motivation. We're Jacob with our striving. We're Jacob with our desire for political power. We're Jacob with our desire to be recognized. It's funny, Pastor Steve launches a new ministry around here, and everybody lines up out the door, but we can't get anybody to actually help clean up anything or work in helps ministry where you can't see what's going on. We want to be seen. We want to be recognized. We want to be celebrated. We want to have prominence. We want to have a title. We long for it. We desire it. And it's not wrong to want to be great. It's not wrong to want to change the world. It's not wrong. But how are we going about this? How are we coming to this? Chapter 28, verse 10. It says, meanwhile. You know, I used to watch The Lone Ranger or whatever, and he'd say, meanwhile, back at the ranch. There's been all these other things going on. You even got here in the previous part here, Esau trying to marry a little bit better girl so maybe his mom and dad wouldn't be so mad at him anymore because they were kind of mad at the women he had before. It's like, hey, I got a better one now, Mom and Dad. We good? We good? Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba, traveled toward Haran. Haran is a place where so many amazing things happen with Abraham. But here he is traveling alone. And at sundown, he arrived at a good place to set up camp. And he stopped there for the night. Here he is, the dark of the night, no help, no hope, far from home, far from his mama, far from the comforts, far from all he's ever known. And all he can do is begin to lay down here in the darkness, in the challenge, in the turmoil of his own soul. All he can do is begin to lie down. But the thing I want to tell you here tonight is this. We find ourselves in messes. We find ourselves messing everything up. We find ourselves motivated by wrong things. We find ourselves deceiving. We find ourselves contending. We find ourselves selfish, prideful. And it's easy to say, God won't come near me. It's easy to say that God's going to cast me off for someone new. For years, Bill, for years I'd lay in bed at night trying to do the network, and the devil would whisper in my ear, you have no ability to do this. Who do you think you are? The doubts, the fears, and I'll be really transparent here tonight. I'm one of these people that have, one minute I think I'm something great, and next minute I think I'm the dumbest thing there is. One minute I think I know better, and the next minute the revelation of how decrepit and foolish I really am comes to light. Pastor Steve told me one time, and he's right, he said, why are you talking so much? Why are you talking so much? What can I say? But we find ourselves in these moments, and I know many, I've met many in the church here. One minute we think too highly of ourselves, the next minute we're writing ourselves off. We find ourselves in the darkness. We find ourselves in the despair. Some of you think that because we have some people from Johnson County over here that you're getting written off or whatever else, or you think I'm too old now, or you say I've been through revival and I don't think I have the energy to go forward, and you're writing yourself off. And we're all together stuck in this desert. Broken people with mixed motivations, with foolishness, with pride, with anxiety, with family issues. Guess what? A church is a family if I've ever heard of one, and every family has its problems. Somebody said to me, JD, don't you know that there's some problems at World Revival Church? I'm like, oh, really? Oh, really? Wow. Some people might not get along every now and then. Oh, my goodness. Wow, I mean, I can't believe it. Told one family that was going to move here that thought so highly of us, I said, I don't want you to move here. I said, because you're going to find out that we're not quite as good as you think we are. Because we're a bunch of people with mixed motivations. This doesn't make it okay. In fact, it's awful. Broken people, foolish people, arrogant people, frightened people, people just wanting to be recognized. Hey, Pastor Steve, look at me. Recognize me. See me. Or a bunch of people that project our own family and personal insecurities and our brokenness and our daddy issues on a pastor or someone else, trying to get something that's hard to get and pretty unrealistic to expect someone to give to you. Just like Jacob, we find ourselves in the wilderness. We find ourselves in the night. And some, they walk away before they ever have a chance. But others of us in the dark night of the soul, underneath the stars, alone in the desert, we begin to discover something amazing. Somebody say, JD, how do we find our way out of this mess? I believe tonight I want to tell you how I think we can. As Jacob begins to lay down at the night, he has no idea that he's about to have an encounter that's going to change everything. The deceiver is about to have an encounter that's going to be the beginning of changing everything about who he is. Jacob found a stone to rest his head, and he began to lay down to sleep. And as he slept, he began to dream. He began to envision. He began to be visited. This isn't something that's happened before for him. Jacob has never encountered God. Jacob is only living off of the words of his own father. But as he slept, he dreamed of a stairway. He dreamed, another translation says, and I like it this way, he dreamed of a highway. He began to envision this realm of transport, this realm of activity. He began to see something he'd never saw before. Because I want to tell you something here. What we try to do sometimes is try to move forward without the encounter. But I'm telling you, it's out of the encounter that begins to unlock destiny. It's out of the encounter that we begin to get our identity. It's out of the encounter that we stop striving. It's out of the encounter that we stop trying to supplant our own brothers. It's out of the encounter that we start trying to work to honor other people, celebrate them, and be excited about their successes, their growth, their ability. But if we don't have the encounter, what we have is mixed motivations. What we have is us dressing up in goat hair. What we have is contention, violence, anger, and alienation. We keep trying to have the revival without the encounter. We keep trying to expect our kids are going to do this without the encounter. And some of us, I've talked to so many people, and they say, well, JD, I'm just trying to make some better decisions, and I'm just gonna will my way into this, and it's not gonna work. We're lying in the desert here, and something begins to happen. We begin to see a realm. We begin to see a God who begins to break through the brass heavens. You say, what do you mean the brass heavens? There's this realm of darkness that tries to go and smother us, to keep us from the glory realm, to keep us from heaven. God originally intended for heaven and earth to come together. Originally, it was supposed to be like a husband and wife. Heaven and earth are two different realms, but they're to come together in union. They're to come together as a husband and wife. They are to be realms that know and flow and relate. And we, though made of earth and designed to operate in earth, made of dust, made of flesh, we were intended to operate in earth, but we were intended to enjoy, to know, and to have the glories of heaven. I don't know if you believe this or not, but I'll go ahead and tell you. Your destiny is not heaven. You know, there's this doctrine in the church called the resurrection. You know what it is? It means you are going to be, boop, re-embodied with a renovated version of this body in the earth. But the idea would be, even as we live on the earth, even as we walk this out, the glory of heaven begins to come and intertwine. But there's darkness, there's violence, there's striving, there's fear, there's confusion, there's smothering that begins to come and feel the lower atmosphere. Pastor Steve was just preaching on this just on Sunday, I believe. He's talking about what he sees as activity in the lower heavens that begins to come down in the lower spheres, in these demonic powers, these principalities, these voices, these corrupting things that begin to smother, that cause us to lose a sense of identity, to lose a sense of hope, that we lose access to power and glory. And the voice of God is trying to smother us, is trying to crush us. We find ourselves separated from God, and like we're praying, and it feels like we're striking heavens that are brass. But there's a glory, there's a goodness, there's a realm where God begins to come and tear the heavens, rend the heavens. He rends the lower darkened realms. And He comes down among those that are unsuspecting, those that are foolish, those who are deceivers, those who have done nothing to deserve His goodness and His glory, those that have wrecked their lives, those that have corrupted their families, those that have stolen their own brother's privilege and blessing. He begins to come down and rend the heavens, and He tears the realm that separates us from the glory. And Jacob begins to witness this, and he begins to see this highway of God. And he sees the angels ascending and descending. In the original language here, this is not talking about walking in nice little neat lines up and down a ladder. It's a little bit like what Pastor Steve was talking about. It's the idea of drastic activity and back and forth and just all kinds of activity flowing out in various ways and direction. And Jacob begins to see this, something that he's never known. I remember at Smithton when the man told the story. He was a pastor, Assembly of God pastor from Minnesota. He was sitting in the church. He said, I have an open vision here, and he sees what looks like a ladder come down out of the back. And as we began to worship, as Eric was leading us into worship, the glory began to move through the room. And he says that he saw the angels rushing down into the meeting, and they were actually running over the top of each other, trying to be the first one down to minister and worship and pray among the people. So they say, well, JD, what's this thing about angels? I'm not big on angels. It's fine. You don't have to be big about angels. But I want to give you a little secret here. You know what angels are? They're the entourage of heaven. You say you want God to come near. Guess who's going to come near with Him? The Bible talks about God riding on the angels, the cherubim, and all. Like he rides them. It's like a cloud of glory. And so if God comes into the room, if God comes near, if the glory begins to come, you know what's going to come with God? The angelic hosts are coming with God. And I remember all the stories I used to hear of the children at the Smithton Revival seeing the angels. I've got written stories of the children seeing them. And there's times where one of the stories they told was the angels would stand up near the front toward the end, and they described them as being like 10 foot tall or something. And they said that the angels would not look toward the crowd. And when Pastor Steve would come up and begin to call the moment to release for the prayer warriors to begin to pray, he would say, now! And those angels would turn around and begin to just move through the house. You say, oh, JD, you getting into angels? No, I'm getting into the Bible. And I'm just telling some stories, some accounts that children that had no reason to lie, that had nothing to prove of what they saw with their own little eyes. But Jacob here, he's seeing something. He's encountering something. He's encountering a highway, a ziggurat, a plateau of advancement and glory, where the heavenly realms are breaking into the earthly realms, and there's a realm of breakthrough and glory. Verse 13, it says, at the top of the stairway stood the Lord. I'm not overly into the angels. I'm into the one who the angels surround. I don't mind heaven's entourage, but I like the guest of honor. At the top of this highway, at the top of this peak stood the Lord. And he said this, I love this. He said, I am the Lord God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. You say, why would he say that? He said that because Jacob had no idea who he was. He had never met God. He said this, I want you to know that I am the God of your ancestors. I am the God of the glories of the ages past. I am the God that's carried forward an amazing story. I'm a God who has brought down strength and life to your family. But tonight, I am not just the God of Abraham. I'm not just the God of Isaac, but I am the God of Jacob. Tonight, God is saying that He's not just the God of the Bible, of Abraham, of David, of the men of old, but tonight He wants to come down and says, you know what? I'm your God. I know you. And I'm inviting you to get up out of your mess, out of your deception, out of your own fear and anxiety, out of your own stupidity. I'm inviting you to encounter me, not because you're good, not because you tell the truth, not because you have anything worthwhile, but because I'm good and I want to bring my blessing. I want to bring my promise. I want to touch the world, and I need somebody who will come and get in the middle of the highway. Somebody that will open up their life. Somebody that will get into the story, get into the family, get into the heritage, that will look past their own deception, look past their own fear and anxiety, look past their own failures and deceit. I am not just the God of Abraham and Isaac, but I'm the God of you. I'm the God that wants to touch you. I'm the God who's inviting you. There's wonderful promises. This land is going to be your land. Your family is going to spread out. I am with you and I'll protect you. Even in the middle of this darkness, in the middle of this desert, with no one around, I'm going to protect you. One day I'm going to bring you back to this land. You know, sometimes God begins to speak to us and tells us, you know, it's not all going to be worked out tonight. Sometimes there's going to be a delay before we come back in to the purposes. Sometimes the problem is we're trying to speed up the future. Sometimes we have to be like Joshua and Caleb, and we have to wait till everybody else is ready before we can go into our place. We're in such a hurry. Some of you young people, you're in such a hurry. We're all in such a hurry. Like we're running out of time. There's a lot of time. Let's listen. Let's be ready. I will not leave you until I finish giving you everything I've promised. You say, well, JD, my story is not going so well. Good, it means your story's not finished. I don't feel like I'm doing that well. Well, you just need to keep going. It means you're in the middle of the story. God's going to keep coming. You say, well, I don't know if I believe that. Well, then you don't believe the God of the Bible then. Verse 16 here, I don't have a whole lot more to go. But tonight here in just a little bit, we're going to open up a highway right here in this front area. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. And the question is, are you willing to get on this highway and have the encounter? Tonight, like I said, this sermon is not the point of the night. Tonight, the point is your encounter, your glory. the experience of God. Jacob awoke from his sleep, amazed. He said this, I love it. Surely the Lord is in this place. It's just like we're always waiting for this day of greater glory. You know, everybody's always talking about someday, someday. What if I told you that the Lord is already in this place? Like, well, you know, one of these days I'm going to be overpowered or whatever. What if He already is here like that? You just are not aware of it. What is it? What if He is already, like, you know, one of these days God's going to bring this breakthrough at World Revival. What if that is already here and you're just not aware of it? What if it's already here and you're just not willing to access it? What if one voice out of this room here tonight, one person, could grab hold of this and it would become a conduit that would just break out everywhere? Somebody say, well, it's not time for that. Yeah, we have to wait for this. We have to wait for that. Well, just ask Evan Roberts that when his pastor told him, why don't you go ahead and preach over in the side room over here to 13 youth, because we're not really ready for what you have to say yet. He went and took the 13 people in the side room, led most of them to the Lord. Revival broke open and turned the nation of Wales upside down. Revival never comes when we expect it. It never comes the way we expect it. And it hardly ever comes through the people we expect it to come through. What if I told you surely the Lord is in this place, but the problem is that we're not aware of it? What if I told you that if you would get your eyes turned on, if you would begin to re-envision, if you would maybe get yourself in a place where you turn off everything and quit listening to everything and get out of your religion and your self-reliance and all that. What if I told you tonight, if some of you just get broken enough, not because you need to weep and wail, but you just need to quit relying on what you think you know and who you think you are and where you think you've been, but you come down to a place and say, I need you, God, and you open up and you listen and you discover that God is already here. The revival is already here. That God isn't holding out. That God isn't up there in heaven going, hey, you know what? If you'll just get cleaned up a little more, I might just give you a little blessing. If you would just hate yourself a little bit more, maybe I might give you a little bit of something. This isn't about self-loathing. This isn't about feeling bad all the time. But it is about positioning ourselves. It is about listening. It is about a willingness to come near the highway of God. Surely the Lord is in this place. And I wasn't aware of it. Jacob says Jacob was also in awe. A lot of your translations say afraid, because we want to make this always about fear, and there's maybe a dimension to that. But what about the sense of awe, transcendence, glory, power, being overwhelmed by something magnificent, by something big? Sometimes the reason why we don't see revival is we've tamed church. We think we know what all this is and what's going to happen. But what if we're wrong? What if there's something more? What would happen if you would be overcome? What would happen if you came in awe? And I'll go ahead and say it. What if some of you actually got afraid because something so big struck you that you could not imagine or comprehend what it is? But Jacob was in awe, and he said, what an awesome place this is. What an awesome place this is. You know, tonight here at World Revival, what if we said this? What an awesome place this is. It's none other than the house of God, the gateway of heaven. In the ancient world, they believed the temple, they called the temple heaven and earth. Because when you went to the temple, when you went to the house of God, that was the place where heaven and earth met. That was the place where the glory realm could be known. That is the place where the angels could ascend and descend. What if I told you tonight that we are all sitting in the house of God, we're setting in the place where heaven and earth meet. And if we would open our eyes, if we would begin to position ourselves, we could get in the highway of God and see everything change. This man who was a deceiver, this man who was selfish, this man who was impetuous, this man who was unwilling to wait on God, begins to encounter God. And it's no longer the story of Abraham and just Isaac. It's now the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it's now the beginnings of a story of a man whose name is no longer going to be the supplanter. It's no longer to be the cunning one, the duplicitous one, the liar. That's no longer what he's going to be known as. But this is the beginning of a change, of a transformation. This man is going to wrestle God, and God's going to look up at him and look him in the eye and say, your name is no longer liar. Your name is no longer supplanter. Your name is no longer deceiver. Your name is Israel. You are the father of covenants. You are the father of nations. Through you is going to come the message of the ages. Through you is going to come the Prince of Peace, the child of glory. Through you, heaven and earth is going to begin to be reconciled. I want to have my prayer team come on up here and start getting ready. You say, what are we going to do tonight? The goal tonight is one thing and one thing only, encounter. Heather, I'm going to have you help me with this. You say, what are we going to do tonight? Well, we're going to do the best we can to see a highway of God right here in the house. We're going to see the stairway. We're going to see the ladder. You say, well, where's that ladder going to be? It's going to be right up here. What we're going to do is we're going to have a double opening fire tunnel here tonight. You say, what do you mean by double opening? We're going to have two tunnels here. You can go to the right or you can go to the left. You guys are going to have to maybe pop one side or the other here. Heather, you can help them here. So we're going to line up here, and one line's going to pop over here and go through this way. The other line's going to come over here and go through this way. You say, well, what's the goal of this here tonight? Look, if you don't want to have an encounter, then you could just go home. If you want to just stay in your own religion or whatever, just go home. That's fine. But I can guarantee you something tonight. There's going to be some people whose lives are going to be permanently changed as they go down the glory highway. As they go down, because I believe that the glory of the Lord is in this house. I believe there are angels going to be running up and down this highway here. And those who will come through, those who will begin to receive, are going to begin to see the glory of God. Some people are going to have their name changed. God's going to knock that deceit off you. He's going to knock those lies off of you. He's going to position you to become the man or the woman of covenant. I'm telling you what, church, God is calling this church to rise up. Listen, I thank God for what He did in the past. I thank God for Smith, and I thank God for Daystar. But those days are over with. Thank God for Abraham and Isaac. But it's time for sons and daughters to have their own experience. It's time for there to be new chapters written. It's time for new people to rise up that can carry the glory. It's time for us to get past our little deceptions, our little arrogance, our little contentions, our little lies. It's time for us to begin to get a new vision of glory. You say, what are we going to do here? We're going to have two lines, one right over there and one right here. And we're going to go through. You can go through as many times as the prayer team can continue tonight. The only thing I ask you tonight is keep moving. Keep moving. Keep moving. You don't have to fall down. You don't have to fall down. Just keep moving. You can go through again. Just keep moving. Prayer teams, we're not playing around here. I want you to imagine you're pushing your glory. We're inviting the glory of God to come down. We're inviting the very entourage of heaven to come. And we're expecting there to be big testimonies tonight. Big testimonies tonight. You're going to have a fire tunnel. So you're going to go through. All right, let's go. Let's do this.
Singing holy, holy, singing holy, 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 this is a realm of your God's glory on the wing. Like the voice of many waters, I can hear the angels singing, holy, holy. They sing, holy, holy. Sing, holy, holy. Sing, of God for fresh on us. We need your presence, your kingdom come, your will be done. Here as Spirit of God, for fresh on us. We need your presence, your kingdom come, your will be done, here as in heaven. The atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here. The evidence is all around. The Spirit of the Lord is here. The atmosphere is changing now, for the Spirit of the Lord is here.